39 North Cole Avenue.
It's a continuation.
Continuation.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, this is a continuation of a hearing from your December meeting. At the December meeting, you deferred to the request from a neighbor who had not had the opportunity to review the plans. The neighbor to take the opportunity to.
Excuse me. There's only one meeting here.
There is some correspondence on 39 North Cole.
To take the opportunity to do that, we also did prepare our response to a general municipal law review that we received in the interim, which is stated in the letter that I'm handing to you.
I don't have the GML letter. Is Lori here? No. Do you have, all you folks, members of the ZBA, have the GML letter from the county? I don't have it in my pile. Lori, do we have a GML letter from the county on 39 Cole, North Cole? Ryan seems to have it.
It's only one meeting. Only one meeting. Only one meeting. Only one meeting.
Carmen, do you have the GML letter? We don't seem to have it. Oh no, that's not the county. That's not the county planning department. All right, so maybe there is. Oh wait, I found it. It's not in order.
It's a January 30th, 2018 letter that we responded to by letter dated today.
If you go through your pile, it's toward the. It's mixed in the middle.
Near the back.
Yeah. Okay. All right. All right, we have all our correspondence. Where did the chair? All right, I'll read the correspondence, but we do need to open. It's a continuation of the public hearing.
Yes, sir.
All right. So there, do you suggest I read the Sarin and Steinmetz correspondence first?
All I can speak to, and I have no knowledge of these conversations. I didn't participate in them. I saw this letter for the first time when you handed it to me. I did not represent my clients in any such discussions. This letter wasn't sent to me by counsel. Presumably also this person knew that the client was represented by counsel insofar as he had clients who were at the previous meeting and had the opportunity to review the record, and nonetheless chose not to communicate with me. So all I can speak to is that we have agreed not to put windows on the rear of the building. That my client has confirmed with respect to the rest of the correspondence here. I don't know anything about that.
Is Lori, do you have the Sarin and Steinmetz letter in front of you?
Yeah, they just handed it to me as we were walking over the door.
All right. We're going to start with that, and Ryan, if I finish reciting it, I'm going to ask you what conditions that, as far as you know, you're agreeing to. Letters dated February 27, 2018. It's 2 pages signed by Daniel M. Richmond and Michael J. Cunningham of the law firm Sarin and Steinmetz, dated February 27, 2018, 2 pages. And it reads, please take note that this firm has been retained to represent the interests of the Abramowitzes and the Weinstocks, the neighbors who reside immediately adjacent to the above referenced site at respectively 46 Decatur, forgive me, I'm new here.
Decatur.
Thank you. That's why I'm asking. 46 Decatur Avenue and 48 Decatur Avenue, collectively the neighbors' properties in the town of Ramapo. With respect to the above referenced matter, the neighbors have engaged in private negotiations with the applicant regarding the design of the proposed two-family home, the project. After negotiations, the neighbors support the project subject to the following conditions stated in this letter. The first condition is that the project will contain no windows on the rear of the building. Stated another way, there will be no windows that face the neighbors' properties. This will help the neighbors to maintain privacy and will allow them to quietly enjoy their properties. I'm going to pause the recitation there. Do you accept that condition?
We have agreed that there will be no windows that face the neighbor's properties. We have not agreed to anything else, according to my client.
Okay. Reading on from the February 27, 2018 letter from Sarin and Steinmetz. The second condition is that the applicant will complete plantings of a sufficient size on the neighbor's properties. The planting should screen both neighbors' properties, 46 Decatur
Decatur.
48 Decatur, landing shall be of a type such as Japanese cedars or privet hedges. Decatur. Which provide tent screening of the neighbor's properties or such similar screening as the neighbors may approve. The planting should be made on the neighbor's property so that the neighbors would have the ability to maintain the plantings. Mr. Carpenter, you do not agree to that condition,
I'm not familiar with it. I wasn't party to these discussions.
at least at this moment. Can you,
I know nothing about it, Mr. Michaels.
is your client here? Is your client?
Yes, I've reiterated, probably not for the fourth time, that the only thing that I am told is agreed to is that there will be no windows to face the neighbor's property. I wasn't party to these conversations, to these settlements. I got this letter this evening. I know nothing about it.
Right.
There will be no windows.
I know you're
facing the neighbor's
speaking for
property.
yourself. Your client is here. You conferred with him and he does not agree to any other condition. as you
Yes.
stated. Got it. Subject to the two conditions in this letter, the neighbors support the project. Okay, so only one condition is being accepted by the neighbors as described in the neighbor's attorney's letter of February 27, 2018. Next is the county GML letter dated January 23rd, 2018. It is 4 pages, signed by, usually it's signed by Douglas J. Schutz. There it is, Acting Commissioner of Planning. And it reads in substance,
We have a response.
well, let me ask you, just to expedite the recitation.
We have no objections to items 3 through 6 or 10 through 13.
3, 4, 5, 6. Thank you. 10 through 13. Appreciate that. My mouth is getting sore.
That's why we put it in writing.
And I will jump from the county's GML letter of January 30th to Mr. Garvin's response of February 27th. County reads, disapprove. Subject site does not meet the minimum lot area standard of 8,500 square feet required for a single-family residence, provides less than 3/4 of lot area required for a two-family dwelling. The lot itself is not conforming for width as well. The proposed two-family residence will require substantial yard variances to accommodate an oversized residential building on an undersized parcel. The surrounding neighborhood is characterized by similarly sized parcels. Granting these bold variances will set a precedent that may result in nearby property owners seeking the same relief. A doubling of the residential density in this neighborhood of non-conforming parcels will negatively impact its community character. Additional residents will generate more traffic on the local streets, leading to congestion and traffic conflicts. While two-family residences are permitted as of right in the R2 zoning district, they are subject to stricter bulk requirements. This site is particularly deficient in meeting these more stringent standards. We recommend that the required variances be denied. And I'll just read from Mr. Carvin's letter of now, February 27. And it reads, as part of the Zoning Board of Appeals review, it considers a January 30, 2018 review conducted by the Rock County Department of Planning, purportedly pursuant to sections 239 L and M of General Municipal Law. The statutory purposes of said reviews to address regional and countywide planning concerns based on the project's impacts on the town of Brownville. No such impacts are noted. Notwithstanding the foregoing, said review addresses area outside the permitted of scope of the said review that are reserved to the exclusive jurisdiction of the Zoning Board of Appeals or the Planning Board as applicable, including inter alia, which means amongst other things, outside the balancing test required to be applied by the Zoning Board of Appeals and therefore impermissible for consideration. Notwithstanding the foregoing, the applicant does not seek an override of any of the comments numbered 3 through 6 or 10 through 13 contained in the review. With respect to the disapproval and comments 1 and 2, so we'll jump back to the county's January 30 GML letter, and comment number 1 reads, or I should say modification 1 reads, permitting development does not comply with applicable bulk standards can set an undesirable land use precedent and result in the overutilization of individual sites. Proposed lot area is 71% of the required minimum. The lot width is 50% of the minimum. Street frontage is 71% of the required minimum. The side and total side yards are 67% of the required minimums. The ability of the existing infrastructure to accommodate increased residential density and undersized parcels is a countywide concern and must be evaluated. This evaluation must consider whether local roads will become more congested, the sewer system, stormwater management systems, and the public water supply will be overburdened. The village must consider the cumulative and regional impacts of permitting such development. 2, the surrounding neighborhood is characterized by similarly sized parcels. Granting these bulk variances will set a precedent that may result in nearby property owners seeking the same relief. Such an increase in density would alter and negatively impact the community character in this neighborhood. The proposal shall be scaled back to more closely conform to the R2 bulk standards. Mr. Carvin's February 27 response to the county's modifications 1 and 2 is, with respect to the disapproval of comments 1 and 2, we request an override. This is a use permitted by right in the zone consistent with the density and style of homes in the neighborhood, and identical relief granted by the board on other properties on the same block. This is one of the few remaining lots that is not developed in this fashion. Sufficient on-site parking is provided, zero net runoff will be complied with, and there is adequate public water and sewer capacity. The applicant will pay any sewer impact fee. As such, these comments and requests do not accurately reflect the character of the community and should be overridden. Jumping back to the county's January 30 GML letter, modification number 7. The architectural plans provided by Draw-Rate dated May 24, 2017 do not match the site plan. The architectural plans show decks at the front, side, entry porticos, and a wall jogging decks along the western facade, all of which are not shown on the site plan. All materials must be consistent. The applicant must clarify their intentions regarding the proposal. Mr. Carbon's February 27 response to county modification number 7 reads, this has been corrected as such.
Speak up, I can't hear.
Overridden. Sorry. This has been corrected as such. This comment should be overridden. County Planning GML letter January 30 modification number 8 reads, the application and site plan indicate the proposed structure will have 3 stories and a floor area ratio of 0.65. However, the site plan shows a building footprint of approximately 2,790 square feet. Assuming each story will have a gross floor area equal to the footprint, the proposed structure will have an overall gross floor area of approximately 8,370 square feet. This would result in an FAR of 1.18. Although this is an estimate, a floor area ratio of 1.18 is 82% greater than the allowed maximum floor area ratio of 0.65. The magnitude of this discrepancy requires further attention. The applicant must positively demonstrate that the proposed structure will conform to the village's FAR requirement. The FAR calculation must be provided on the site plan. If the FAR exceeds the allowable 0.65, the variance application must be amended, and the public hearing notice must be reissued. Any application that is revised due to an increase in FAR must be sent to this department for review. Mr. Carbon's February 27 response to county modification number 8 reads, the county's interpretation of the Spring Valley Code is incorrect. The basement is not counted towards the FAR calculation, and the authority to interpret the code lies with the local building inspector. As such, this comment should be overridden. County's January 30 modification number 9 reads, the use of tandem parking spaces prevents egress for vehicles parked behind other vehicles and creates an inconvenient situation for residents. This layout will encourage residents to park vehicles off-site instead of in their designated spaces and negates the purpose of on-site parking requirements. The tandem parking spaces must be reconfigured to allow independent access for all parking spaces. Mr. Carbon's February 27 response to county modification number 9 is, the parking was designed pursuant to specific standards repeatedly articulated by the Zoning Board of Appeals. As such, this comment is inconsistent with local determination and home rule and should be overridden. That concludes the county's January 30 GML letter and Mr. Carbon's response to same. And sorry?
It continues 10 through 13, you do not.
Mr. Carbon indicated those would be acceptable.
That's correct.
The applicant agrees or will accept the county modification numbers 10, 11, 12, and 13, and also 3, 4, 5, and 6. So those would be made conditions of any approval that this board would be inclined to grant. We have the same letter from the county, the town of Clarkstown. Planning Department dated January 24, 2018, one page signed by Gilbert J. Heim, Chairman. It reads, in substance, Clarkstown Planning Board does hereby find that proposed referrals will result in a significant overutilization of the properties. These proposals will impact the community character, traffic, water quantity, and quality, drainage, stormwater runoff, sanitary sewer service. And we have Kathy Tolfs. Let's see, does she have something for 39 North Pole? Yes, Kathy Tolf, February 26, 2018. Reads, this property continues a trend of reducing the side yard to 10 feet and then plugging it with parked cars. A 3-story building height requires a minimum of 9 unimpeded feet to properly and safely set any ground ladder. Best practices for firefighting require roof and window access at multiple points for fire control, rescue of inhabitants, and firefighter safety. Reducing side yard clearances and parking cars in them means that the potential for fire spread is increased and firefighter access to the side and rear yards is decreased. This is innately contrary to what we do. This project needs to be smaller to fit the land upon which it will sit. The believe that is all for correspondence. Lori, is that correct?
Yes.
This is a continuation of the public hearing.
Ryan?
Yes, so 10 feet on the sides is kept clear. This is, as we began to discuss last month, it's a garden variety, two-family on North Cole Avenue. If you look at the vicinity map, you'll see that the lot size is fairly standard for the street itself. I'm sorry. There you go. That the lot size, while beneath the zoning minimum lot area, is consistent with the other lots that are there. The configuration of the parking is similar to that which has been approved on adjoining and surrounding lots. The magnitude of the variances themselves is the same. I would note that despite the comment that was made about the size of the structure needing to be scaled back, the size of the structure complies with your floor area ratio requirement. In fact, the only variances that are being sought for the existing condition is the minimum lot area. Lot width is an existing condition. We exceed the minimum front yard requirement. The only variances that are being sought are for 5 feet on each of the side yards with respect to non-existing conditions. The only variances that are being caused by construction is a 5-foot variance on each side. We have preserved the 10 feet on each side of the property, which has been a red line that was drawn by this board. And given that this conforms with the board's actions on other applications on bordering, neighboring, adjacent, adjoining properties, the law of the case would set a very, very high bar for the denial of the variance, and we respectfully request the board's support of the variance as we apply for it.
You said this board, you said 10 feet is what this board has agreed to.
I said this board has insisted on 10 feet as a red line of property clearance on the side of each of the parcels. And we've had applications where we would come in and seek relief to 7 or seek relief to 5, and the board has pushed that back up to the 10, while the 15-foot standard is the standard in the zoning code. For fire clearance purposes, the board has asked us to try to maintain 10 feet, and that's maintained in this particular proposal.
Mr. Clark, I don't think the board has asked you to try and maintain 10 feet. 10 feet was what we said would be the minimum we would consider, but nobody said it could be 10 feet. I don't think any of us communicated that. We said we would not consider anything less than, but we didn't say 10 feet was acceptable. And if we did,
What I said, Madam Chair, and we once the chair, always the chair. Well, you never lose your honorific. You never lose your, listen, you're Madam Chair, just don't call me late for dinner, right? Call me whatever you want, just don't call me late for dinner. I love you too. What I said was that the board has drawn 10 feet as a red line that they did not want interfered with respect to clearance on the sides. I did not say that you had granted some kind of carte blanche approval. If you took it that way, I apologize. But again, with respect to the size of the building itself, the size is compliant. With respect to the layout of the parking, it's consistent with the other homes on the lot. And we have agreed to that request from the neighbors to have no windows facing them. So given that it's consistent with the development template, the character, the precedence, would respectfully request support for the application.
Sidewalks?
I'm sorry?
Curbs, sidewalks?
So those can be installed, sir.
Fencing in the front?
If that's a request, that it's been asked on other properties, we agree.
Looking on the survey on the side of the property, and parking 1 and 3 doesn't line up with the building. I'm not sure, Walter, you want to take a look at that? Where the entrance of the building is, on the side?
And you want them pushed back?
The door has to be pushed away.
Yeah, either the door or something.
That's the door for the car.
That's a big door. It's a big car door.
So you need to move the door back? Yes.
Yes.
tend to keep the parking spaces there.
Correct.
Or you can, well, there's only 4 spaces required. This could be one.
Yeah, either one.
I would suggest.
So why don't we agree that there needs to be unimpeded clearance to the doors, that the doors in the parking spot can't be in the same spots? Is that, you're not an architect, I'm not an architect, we're not gonna know exactly where to move it, but I think that's what you're trying to do, right?
Just the common.
All right, so we can,
Also curb stop?
yes, sir.
Okay. Any other
Driving
comments?
similar is on the plan?
Yes, sir. I believe so, if not, and we show a new fire line coming in off the road. Happy to go through the GMO.
Disapproved, so I don't have to count the numbers, Mr. Carver said he counts well.
I didn't say I counted well, I said I know how to count. I didn't say I know how to count well.
Also, the windows, and it's in the came to an agreement, as long as it doesn't interfere with the code, as far as safety.
Obviously. Well, we couldn't, you have very specific window requirements in the village and nothing, we couldn't agree for those to be waived in any event. With respect to the GML, Ms. Caldwell, we note with respect to the overriding comments 1 and 2, the development pattern. With respect to comment 7, we've corrected that. With respect to comment 8, you're certainly familiar with the FAR calculations in these types of homes. And with respect to comment 9, the parking configuration that we utilized is one that this board has approved before, and that's why we utilized it again. If the board wishes to reconfigure the parking, the way to comply with the county's requirement would be to put the parking in the front yard, which is generally something I have found that this board doesn't look favorably on, and so therefore the parking spots are on the side.
Any comments from the public?
Absolutely. I gotta stay awake. Can we get cushions on the seats?
This is how it starts. You're gonna be redecorating the whole room, replacing the carpets.
I think we need
These
to
carpets
make
are
over.
carpets.
Carpet.
We can all agree the carpet's got to go.
I wish we could move so much. Half the people left. Yeah, after 20. Yeah. I, Vivian Street, solemnly affirm or attest that the testimony I am about to give is the truth to the best of my ability and knowledge. So, we're talking about Twin Avenue. To the zoning board, thank you again for allowing me to speak before you. And I just like to say to the zoning board, I moved my eyes. We talk about, which one? Well, they're all related because it's all across the street. Pretty much. It's very close. Church and Cole and Savanco and Twin. And that's why I want to, like my brother Walter, I want the zoning board to look at all of what you're doing in a larger scale. We don't have a master plan, and we're cherry picking our village to every little parcel. And now we can't go out, so we're going like horizontal, like row houses, squeezing everything in, allowing properties to be built on larger, on smaller footprints. I'm hearing all of these reports from the county. Please, zoning board members, consider your votes. I don't know where you live, but I like trees. And I've been saying this for the last 2 years. My village is becoming concrete. Okay? And it's not pleasant. To hear 15 trees off Ridge, they used to be beautiful areas. Have you been down North Cole? Have you been down the block? One property he left, Mr. Licata, 19 Hoyt Street. I went there. I went around. I didn't do as much as my friend Steve did, but I went. It's so congested. It's not fair for anyone to live in conditions like that. So while you may want to approve property for an owner, think about the people who live here. I'd like for you all to consider the people who live in this village and your vote, how precious your votes are. And absolutely, conscience and everything else. So yes, I'm rising to oppose this because it's larger than the footprint of the property. And to say that it's helping the community that's there, again, I can't rationalize a single family house going into a double, a triple, a quadruple. It doesn't make sense to me. And I think most people think this is suburbia, not Brooklyn, or Queens, or Long Island, or other places. I'm from Brooklyn, so I can speak about Brooklyn. So, we really want to see trees. It's suburbia. It's not urban. We're becoming urban. Spring Valley is only a mile. There's not much left, folks. And I'm staying here for Stonehenge. That's the next one. No, I forgot. Twin before that, right? Do you need this again? Oh, good. You got it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public?
I, Stephen White, do solemnly affirm or attest that the testimony I'm about to give is the truth to the best of my ability and knowledge. Stephen White, 10 Garden Place. A couple of things that I noted about this property with the lot size, and that is that, a couple of things I noticed about the property with the lot sizes is that this is an area where two-family is allowed. But just because two families are allowed doesn't mean that the lot is necessarily designed in such a way that it's going to be easy to build a two-family building. And so in order to squeeze the two-family in where it's really not that big, sometimes they need to design something that goes a little bit over. That's where they get the 15-foot side yard to the 10-foot side yard. So it's very hard to build that design. So not every lot is really going to be amenable to building the building that you want to build. And when you get that piece of property, it's not a hardship on you that you got a piece of property that's not really going to be easy to build a two-family. It might be very difficult to build it within all the rules. But you don't have to build a two-family on it just because two-family is allowed there. It might be that certain ways of the way that particular lot is structured don't make it easy to build a two-family. You might have to actually build a two-family that might have really small ones in it, and that might not really be the best thing for the families moving in. But if you go over that 15 and put it to 10, it makes it difficult for the fire people to get in. It also makes the houses so very close. And sometimes these houses, even though they're not taller than is allowed, they're a lot taller than the houses that are next to it. And they're right, when you build a house that's very tall next to it, and as was previously said, you can see this by driving up and around that same street, North Cole. You can see that this is the situation with some of the things that have been approved. So what I'm saying is that by approving this variance for this 10 feet instead of 15 feet, it just sounds like 5 feet to you. But when it actually gets built, it's a much bigger impact on the community. And sometimes you guys saying it's got to be 15 feet is really, you're the stop. You're the one and then that makes them have to conform to those rules, and then they build something that fits so many other ways that the community needs. So that little stop that you give them and say, no, we really, in this situation, it happens to be, there might be some places where you might get a 10 feet, but in certain places, if you look at it, and I had to pull this up on Google because I didn't have time to actually go visit there. If you look at it, if you get really close to the next door houses, it's really going to be towering over them in this particular instance. And I think that's what the county was getting at with their GML. And it concerns me when I hear ideas that somehow the GML they're not really authorized in this way, or that they're taking away your rights. And I worry that if you override the GML based on those things, you might end up getting a lawsuit from the county. And in each one of those situations, if that was your reasoning, that, well, the county doesn't have authority to put a GML on that issue, they might push back eventually. I don't know how much, as taxpayers, we're going to end up paying the bill if you start incurring lawsuits from the county. So I'm worried about that. So I'm hoping you'll consider that when you think about overriding the county. But again, my main concern for this particular piece of property is the size of the house being enabled by that extra variance that they're asking for. And I'm hoping that you'll ask them to go back to the drawing board, not throw everything away, but go back and design something that fits with the rules that our village has set up. I think it's possible. I don't think it's an excess of hardship to ask them to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, absolutely.
I, Charles F. Bradford, do solemnly affirm or attest that the testimony or statements that I make are the truth and the best of my ability and my knowledge. I'm asking this ZBA board not to just ask who would like to be heard on this matter, but to listen.
Amen.
Listen, listen.
Amen. Yeah. Amen.
Thank you.
Mentality.
Any other comments from the public? Seeing none, Ryan?
Just so the record is clear, Mr. Chairman, no variance is being sought for the size of the house.
The size of the house complies with the zoning. You have a floor area ratio of 0.65 that governs the size of the home relative to the size of the property. Smaller properties, smaller buildings. We are not seeking a variance for the size of the building. The other conditions for which we're seeking variances are existing conditions of lot area, lot width, and street frontage. Nothing that we are proposing to build is changing any of that. The only thing that's being changed as a result of what we're proposing to build is 5 additional feet on the side yard. A variance of 5 feet on each of the side yards has been granted on numerous properties on the same street and adjoining adjacent neighboring properties. It would be an arbitrary and capricious exercise of this board's authority on these facts to deny the variances in that instance. Applying the balancing test, this is consistent with community character. It's a typical lot size. This is a use that is permitted by right in the R2 zone, consistent in both its nature and its design with that of the surrounding properties. With respect to off-site environmental impacts, parking is compliant and on-site. Zero net runoff is achieved. There will not be outflow impacts on neighboring properties. The variances have been minimized. That is reflected in the fact that the only variances that are being sought, bulk variances being sought for outside of existing conditions, is for side yard and for side yard only. We have agreed to comply with most of the conditions that are in the county's general municipal law review. With those where they have asked for some corrections, we have tried to correct it, and where they're wrong, we have pointed that out. We utterly reject the paternalistic interference by the town of Clarkstown in the operation of this body with respect to a property that's not within its borders and over which it has no statutory authority. And I would suggest that this board's precedents on previous decisions on North Cole Avenue itself, as well as the representations we've made tonight, not only justify but compel the granting of the variances and the overriding of the appropriate conditions of the GML. Thank you. I can look up in the most recent issue of the database. The last record that I'm able to pull up is from the Town of Ramapo database showing a sale in 1992 of 39 Cole Avenue North to a Fitzroy and Brunilda Moody. I have not inquired as to whether there's been any further transfer since then, but if that's material to the board's determination, we could certainly look into that.
No, I thought I knew, this name I know, so I was trying to figure out this property.
Yeah, I know the pastor as well. I don't know that he currently resides in this particular location at this time. He's ill? Well, there's one thing I know about him. He's going to preach from his deathbed. That man's got more energy than anything I've ever seen. So I'm so sorry to hear that. And she also, tough woman, good woman.
Is there a motion? Motion?
What are you having a motion for?
Closing the public hearing. 1 second. Do you still have any comments?
Well, I was going to, but go ahead.
Okay, no, we're not rushing.
I
Still early.
Whose phone? Someone left their phone up here?
Oh, I did. I'll get it on my next. My name is all over it. You don't want it.
I keep a list of people who still have a sense of humor after 11 p.m. It's not a long list.
No, not yet.
Well, I have concerns with the county.
Oh, is it?
And I have concerns.
It's 11 here. The clock is at 10. Oh, the clock is.
Happy to go through the GML item by item. Where did I put my...
Okay, and I want to leave it open so this can be done, because I don't like to override stuff.
copies of my letter.
I have a copy of it, yes, I did, but.
Do you already have it? March 14th, you already have it? Because we're putting a lot of items in March 14th. So do you already have?
My letter on the June.
What I'm saying is March 14th already filled up.
So on the disapproval generally, and on comments 1 and 2, which are opinions about, a community character, we respectfully request that be overridden because it's a use permitted by right in the zone. Minimal variances are being requested. Both the architecture and the size of the home and the size of the lot are comparable with the surrounding properties and the precedence of the board. It had not been the practice, I understand, not all applications over the years were necessarily sent to the county, and the village is in update of its procedures is making sure it gets these GML reviews in. But this is no different and frankly less intrusive than relief that's been granted by the board in the past 2, 3, 4 years on all the surrounding lots. With respect to that's with respect to the disapproval in comments 1 and 2, Madam Caldwell. With respect to comment 3, we agree. With comment 4, we agree. With comment 5, we agree. With comment 6, we agree. With comment 10, we agree. With comment 11, we agree. With comment 12, we agree. With comment 13, we agree. Comment 7 requested a correction. We made that correction. Comment 8 refers to the calculation of the FAR and whether that basement was included, and Mr. Booker provided that clarity. And with respect to comment 9, that had to deal with the parking spaces being out of the front yard. And I had stated previously that this board has insisted that many times that the parking be moved out of the front yard, and that's why this is done in that way. But of the 13 comments, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 11, 12, 13, 8 of those 13 comments we have no problem with. One of them we corrected in response to. Another one, we designed the parking the way the board's approved in the past. The other one is the Spring Valley FAR interpretation, and so it's really just a question about whether there should be, it's the generalized disapproval, which we think mischaracterizes the type of housing which is permitted there. But with respect to, most of the items raised in the GML, we don't have a problem. We're not asking for overrides.
Okay. Any other comments from the board? Is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So what is he doing to correct those? What are you doing to correct those, Mr. Cobb?
But with respect to 8 of the items in the county's letter, we agree with their recommendations, so we're not doing anything because we're accepting them. With respect to comment 7, we made the correction on the map that was requested. With respect to comment 8 mischaracterizes how the FAR is calculated, so we disagreed with that. And with respect to comment 9, we designed the parking in the way that this board has generally preferred the parking be designed. We appreciate what the county has to say, but they did not have, they don't like necessarily the way this board has asked us to push the parking to the sides of the building, but that's what this board has repeatedly approved, so that's the design that we used. So where we could correct and adopt, we did. Where we thought that the county was incorrect in those few instances, we pointed that out as well. And where we thought that what we were proposing was consistent with the past practices of this board, that's what we've stuck to.
Yeah, I have one more question, then I'm done. The doors, the basement doors. Mr. Booker, I said they have an overhang, is that?
Typically, a roof counts towards setback and FAR.
Yeah. So, is that figured in your FAR?
The FAR has been calculated the same way it's calculated for all the homes on North Cole with respect to the inclusion in the basement, whatever ancillary items. We're not seeking an FAR variance. So we are bound by 0.65, however it gets calculated, however it gets come in at building permit, whatever it is, we're not seeking an FAR variance. There's a lot of discussion about the size of the building. The size of the building is compliant. There's a lot of discussion about FAR. We're not seeking a variance for FAR.
I'm concerned when it comes to parking, we have the parking spaces on the side.
We could put them in the front yard if you'd like. You've often told me that you didn't.
I don't want them in the front yard, but I want to make sure there's ample space where you've got this overhang for these cars to get in. Mr. Booker, that was my question.
So he agreed to push it back because of the parking.
Is this the same issue with the door that's adjacent to the
Yes.
parking space? I would suggest eliminate the rearmost parking spaces and just let them be beyond the setback and in the front.
He said it went too far. The parking is
It's too far beyond the house, in my opinion, but I don't have any vote.
All right, that was my concern.
And then to add the stuff, how's it called, the curve stuff?
So, Mr. Cobb, you know what we're saying?
Yes.
Move it back.
I understand.
I want to make sure I have your attention. We were just admonished for not hearing, we were listening, so I want to make sure you were listening and hearing.
Okay, any other comments from the board? Seeing none, any motion to close the public hearing? Motion? Second? Okay, properly moved second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Yes, Lori's not here, you want to write the comments? What we're approving? Public hearing is now closed. Any motion to approve or disapprove?
Walter, do you know what Lori is? Walter?
She had a personal stop to make.
Lori ran out to see her son, I believe.
All right, I'll do my best. I may ask you to repeat your comments. So go ahead, 39 North Cole.
Okay, first, the motion was by Mr. Solomon.
To close the public hearing? Second by who? Thanks, Phil. Thank you. Okay, I got that.
Okay, now, a motion to approve or disapprove?
Ladies and gentlemen, please. Share this. Hear more conversation from the audience than we usually.
Is there a motion or?
Motion to approve with conditions, no windows in the back as agreed.
Right, sorry.
Okay, you want to list the items?
Hold on. Motion to approve. I'm not a secretary. By Mr. Finney, and the conditions are, very slowly,
Sprinkler,
sprinklering,
zero net runoff,
zero, got it.
curb stop,
Curb stops.
and move back the parking.
Sorry, curb stop, move back the parking, can you be a little more specific?
Either move back the parking or move the entry. So the entry is
Is there a number of feet to move the parking back?
Let the engineer design.
So move back parking in what direction?
I think what we agreed to, what I'm sorry to hear, is was that we requested there not be a blockage between the door and the parking spot.
So as not to block, interfere, what are we not interfering with, sorry?
The door and the parking.
Basement
Basement door
and parking lot.
and parking lot. So move back parking area, so as not to block or slash interfere the basement door and parking area.
Yeah.
And no windows on the side facing
Leave
the
it
back.
As long as it doesn't interfere with village code.
So no windows facing
Rear.
rear.
It'll be right into the bedrooms of the adjacent house. That's the primary.
Can you give me a,
Can't use that. Carpet.
no, what side are the windows on? No windows facing rear, is that clear enough to the building
Yeah,
inspector?
rear of the building.
Yeah, rear of the building.
I should say no windows on the rear.
Yeah.
Is that more accurate? No windows on the rear?
No.
Whatever makes you happy.
Because they're showing on the plans.
It's in the rear.
So that no one can see anybody's rear through the window that's in the
No
rear of the
windows
building.
on the rear of the building. And what was that last item, Mr. Finney? Sorry, you had one other item?
Front fencing as well. Front fencing.
All right, so I thought there was something else after the windows, no?
Yeah, fencing.
No windows or doors and no opening on the rear side, because the neighbors are not gonna see anything open in the back side.
No doors either?
No doors, no
I think we need to have a door.
Yeah, you might have to have a door.
We need to have a door. The agreement was for
The
windows.
second,
And
the second floor windows, you know.
no second floor windows where?
On the rear side.
There's no window.
But there's no windows at all on the rear.
They was gonna agree.
Right now, there is.
No, but the condition is no windows at all, correct?
Correct.
So why do we need to specify second story or first story? If there's no windows on the rear, there's no windows on the rear,
Yep, that's what it is.
right? Is that?
Only the doors, right?
I'm not mentioning doors, because they may need doors for,
No one discussed doors.
what about the fencing?
Front fencing. Fence to the front.
So front yard fencing?
Yeah, because that is a busy street and it's quiet as it's kept.
Front yard fencing.
Green.
Front yard fencing. Laurie, I'd like to give you some information, because on my circle, we're making a motion here. No, you can't. Can you please take the step?
I certainly will.
This is on 39 North Cole.
Okay.
Got it? 39 North Cole. Motion to close the public hearing by Member Solomon.
Okay.
Seconded by Mr. Fani. All were in favor of closing the public hearing.
Okay.
Motion to approve by Mr. Fani with the following conditions. Sprinkling in accordance with New York State Code.
Okay.
Zero net increase in surface water runoff. Zero net increase in surface water runoff.
Okay.
A curb stop in accordance with the building inspector's requirements. Curb stop in accordance with building inspector's requirements. Move back the parking area so as to not block / interfere. So move back the parking area so as to not block / interfere the basement door and the parking area?
Then it's moved back, that means further into the lot.
I tried to get some clarification, and help me out here.
Forward.
Move it forward.
So move it forward.
Right, eliminate one spot, because you actually have 3 on each side.
So, move parking area forward. Sounds better. Move parking area forward
Okay.
so as to not block / interfere the basement door, period, or so as to not block the basement door, period.
And comply with requirements stated by in the GML from the county.
Okay, but they have to anyway, unless
Well,
but if you're
we don't
overriding,
specify.
we need to talk about overriding, that's important. No windows on the rear of the building, so no windows on the rear of the building, and front yard fencing. Okay, any other conditions you do have to address the county GML letter?
Build new curbsides.
Sorry?
We have them.
We have curb
No,
stop.
not curbs, curbs.
Say curb stop, curb stop.
Curb stop.
Is it what people?
Some curbs.
You want to have a curb up.
Everywhere in the front?
Front curb.
Front curbs, on the road.
Front curbs along the road?
Yeah.
Front curbs along the road, Laurie. Now, the county GML letter of January 30, 2018, is there a motion to override some of the modifications? Did you want to hear the ones that Mr. Carvin is asking you to override? I'll just give you the numbers. They are 1, 2, 7, 8, and 9. 1, 2, 7, 8, and 9. He's asking you to override. He gave you reasons in his February 27th correspondence, and he also gave it to you verbally. So, is there a motion to override or not? Or override some and not the others?
So you got a motion that
We
you're
have a
already
motion.
on, so how you gonna start another? It was 1, 2, 7, 9, you said?
No. 1, 2, yeah, I'm sorry, Ms. Cole. 1, 2, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 7, 8, and 9. 7, 8, and 9.
1, 2, 7, 8, 9.
7 through 9.
Who's wrong?
1, 2, and 7 through 9.
Yes, Mr. O'Donnell.
Well, when I get my hands on him, let me tell you.
Well, 9 is not possible.
Do we need to bring a new motion to override that? or-
Yes, absolutely. And what's your inclination? Is there an inclination either way? Let me hear it, and I'll
We
tell
make
you what
one
to do.
motion? Should be one motion?
Don't make a motion yet. What are you thinking? To override or not? Okay, to override. What's it based on?
He's making a motion, I guess.
Is it based on Mr. Carvin's correspondence February 27 and his verbal testimony at the public hearing, or something else?
Yes, that's exactly it.
All right, so Mr. Fanny's motion is to override Martin County Planning Department's January 30, 2018 GML letter modifications 1, 2, 7, 8, and 9, based upon the February 27 correspondence of Brian Carvin and his testimony given orally during the public hearing. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Is there a second?
Second?
You're saying all of them collectively here?
No. Well, yes, he's moving collectively.
1, 2, 7, 8, and 9.
I have a question on 7, because Mr. Booker, did you read item number 7 on here? The architectural plans provided by Draw Right dated May 24th. Okay.
Mr. Carvin, I think, said that has been corrected. Let me check. Yes, he states that's been corrected. So he's asking to override it because it's been corrected. I guess we'd have to look at the plans. It's the architectural plans, but these are these the architecturals or these? I'm not an architect, engineer, building inspector. Can you please look at this, Walter? All right. This is what it says. The architectural plans provided by drawing dated May 24, 2017 do not match the site plan. The architectural plans show decks at the front, side entry porticos, and a wall jog, and decks along the western facade, all of which are not shown on the site plan. All materials must be consistent. I think that's what it said. Is it part of that? It's part of that set.
Those decks are different. You said there's porticos.
Yeah, the county's saying that the decks at the front, side entry porticos, and a wall jog and decks along the western facade are not shown on the site plan.
Okay, well, the deck in the front will be under the footprint of the roof, so it wouldn't show on the site plan.
Okay.
The deck in the back, there's decks shown in the back. They agree. And the entry porticos, they seem to be in the correct place.
Looks like it's been correct.
This deck is underneath the roof line and in the footprint. That's why you can see it. It's differentiated like here. These decks are outside the footprint of the building. These are in the interiors of the building.
Okay, thank you, Walter. So it looks like it's been corrected. Item number 7, modification.
Is there a second?
Second? What's the conditions?
And the clerk called the roll.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay, roll call vote.
I will second. Is that a motion?
You seconded it, okay.
One motion and one, but we had one open and now we have one.
Yeah,
The amendment.
Okay, so this is a motion that you seconded to override 1, 2, 6.
No, it's a, I think it's a motion to approve with all the conditions and the override.
No, I think he's still on waiving.
Is it
You're still on waiving.
You can make it as one
Second
motion.
waiving.
I don't mind one motion. If you want to make it 2, make it 2.
Make one motion.
It has to be one motion because overridens are part of the conditions. So you can't have conditions separate and overridden separate.
I'll accept that, sure.
You want a motion to approve
Yes.
all the conditions as
Right.
stated.
Right. And just note that the modifications of the county that were not overridden are conditions of the approval as well. Right, Mr. Finney? And I think that's by operation of law anyway. It doesn't need to be stated, but it's good to repeat it.
Okay,
So the motion is to approve by Mr. Finney
right.
with the list of conditions that we recited, in addition to the modifications from the county that were accepted by the applicant, and those are numbers 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 11, 12, and 13, and the overriding of the other modifications from the county, and we're overriding 1, 2, 7, 8, and 9, and that was the motion. There was a second by
Mr. Sullivan.
Mr. Solomon, Member Solomon.
All right, roll call vote. Member Caldwell. Okay, Member Thatcher?
What, I really don't understand the motion. So could someone please repeat it?
Right, I'll try to paraphrase it. The motion is to approve the application.
He made the motion,
Yes.
so he needs to read it himself because I don't think he knows what he's.
Mr. Finney, let me paraphrase it, and if I'm wrong, you correct me.
Okay.
Motion is to approve the application for the variances as submitted as of this evening's submission with several conditions. Did you understand the conditions that?
I read the conditions.
Okay. The other conditions are modifications numbers 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 11, 12, and 13 of the Rockland County Planning Department's January 30th, 2018 GML letter. And the motion is to override the other modifications, which are 1, 2, 7, 8, and 9.
Not modifications.
Correct? Did I leave anything out?
The 8 are conditions as well.
No, not the overrides. The ones you're overriding will not be conditions. You're overriding 1, 2, 7, 8,
and 9.
9.
And that's one motion altogether, can I?
So, yeah, all one motion.
So one motion is done.
That's the motion.
All
That's
right.
the motion that was made, that's the motion that was
You like
seconded.
that?
Yeah, what took so long?
Okay, okay, yes to approve the variances, overriding the county GML for number 1, 2, 7, and 8, and all the conditions stated by my co-workers. Is that so, Roger?
You're overriding 1, 2, 7, 8, and 9. I'm not,
1,
you
2,
left out
7,
8.
8, and 9.
You good?
Yeah.
Okay. Member Caldwell.
Is that the only name you know today? Ran right back to
She
me.
wants to go home.
So why, you on out there, you doing all the whispering, tell her what you want to vote for. Yes.
Okay, Member Thatcher.
Stop down there. You voted, she voted yes already.
I voted.
You can vote twice.
Other two.
Okay, Member,
Yes. What are we doing next?
Deputy Chair Pack.
Yes, just to prove it all, the given conditions before.
And Chair Nelson.
Abstain, and motion passes.
Thank you very much.